Welcome to Lesson 7 in Unit 25, Science in St. Louis. In this lesson, students will answer the question, how do designers apply ideas about force and motion to create exciting exhibits? In this lesson, students will review that the texture of a surface can affect the amount of friction that surface has. The more friction a surface has, the more force it requires to move an object over that surface. They'll also review the ideas that simple machines, like ramps, can help reduce the amount of force it takes to move an object or change the direction of the force needed to move the object. In the Engage portion of this lesson, students will watch a video of someone going down the different slides found at the City Museum. You'll then ask students the questions, what do you notice? And do you have any questions about this phenomenon? In the Explore part of this lesson, students will conduct an activity that will show them that the texture of a slide can affect the speed at which you go down the slide. You'll first start off by constructing a model of a slide. You'll do this by taking a couple of books and putting a ramp on top of the books. You'll notice that the wooden ramp has two different textures on it. There's a rough surface and a smooth surface. You'll take the wooden block and slide it down the smooth surface of the ramp and the rough surface of the ramp, showing students how the friction can affect that. You'll then continue the conversation by asking the students, well, how do the different types of clothes you wear affect how you go down a slide? Are there any clothing that make you go down faster or slower? You'll then model this by wrapping different fabrics around the wooden block and sliding the wooden block down your modeled slide. Students will then conduct their own fair test of this investigation. They'll start off by choosing an independent variable, which is 3 different types of fabrics that they'll wrap around the wooden block, and then they'll choose which dependent variable they want to measure. They can measure how long it takes the block to slide down the ramp, or they can measure how far the block slides off of the ramp. Students will record their findings in their student journal, and then come to a conclusion about how the different materials we can wear when we go down a slide can affect the speed at which we go down the slide at. In the Explain portion of this lesson, we're going to connect that activity that we just did in the Explore portion to the idea of friction. Students will obtain information by reading an article about friction. Once students have finished the reading about friction, have them go back to their conclusion question on their Explore lab. Challenge them to integrate the ideas of friction into their answer. In the Elaborate portion of this lesson, you'll read the book Roll, Slope, and Slide. Use the Read Aloud guide in your teacher pages to focus your conversation on how ramps reduce the amount of force needed to move an object. Once students are finished reading the book, they're going to draw a model of a ramp that occurs in their everyday life. In this model, they'll draw a force diagram to show how the direction of the force changes with the ramp and how the actual amount of force they use lessens with a ramp. They will then answer the question about how simple machines can make it easier to do work. At this time, you just make the connection that work is the amount of force you exert and the distance you move an object. So when you lower the amount of force you need to move an object, you've reduced the amount of work you need to do. In the Evaluate portion of this lesson, students will complete a formative assessment about simple machines. In the assessment, students will first start off by going over the ideas of friction on inclined planes. And then they'll evaluate 2 different models. Having the conversation, if a student wants to climb up a slide, how does the shape of the slide affect the amount of force needed for that student to climb up? By the end of this lesson, students will have reviewed the ideas that friction can affect the amount of force needed to move an object over a surface, and how simple machines can either change the amount of force needed to move an object or the direction of the force.